Today we're going to be discussing Knapp and Vangelisti's model of relationship development. This presentation was prepared by myself, Zachary Bush, and Lou Nagun for a communication applications class when I was in college. To quote an anonymous letter published by Anita Vangelisti in Interpersonal Communication and Human Relationships, Dear Dr. Vangelisti, my problem is that I recently broke up with a guy with whom I was previously very close, and now he acts like he never even knew me. I've seen this happen with some of my friends, too. Why can't people just be friends after they've been closer than that? How can people act so cold to those they've shared so much with? It's really an uncomfortable situation for me. I'd be a lot happier if we could just go back to being friends. Can we? Signed, not wanting to throw it all away. Vangelisti dedicates the second chapter of her textbook to questions like this about why relationships tend to follow certain patterns over time. Knapp's model was the tool she used to provide that answer, and it is that model we will discuss today. About Knapp and Vangelisti. Dr. Mark L. Knapp, Jesse H. Jones Centennial Professor Emeritus of Communication and UT Distinguished Teaching Professor Emeritus, is internationally known for his work in nonverbal communication. He is the original creator of this relationship model. Anita Vangelisti is the Jesse H. Jones Centennial Professor of Communication at the University of Texas at Austin. Her work focuses on the associations between communication and emotion in the context of close personal relationships. She used Knapp's model to help explain patterns in relationships in the book Understanding Human Communication. I would like to demonstrate that Knapp's model is an excellent tool for examining the state and direction of a relationship and show that its predictive power is enhanced when considered in the context of social dialectics and social penetration theory. Now, to that end, I'm going to start by talking about some of the categories and a summary of the model. The stages of coming together include initiating, experimenting, integrating, and bonding. And the stages of coming apart include differentiating, circumscribing, stagnating, avoiding, and terminating. Now, there's also this stage called, there's also a sort of pseudo stage called relational maintenance, which is like as long as you stay within the context of integrating, bonding, differentiating, and circumscribing within those four, you're kind of just maintaining a relationship. You can have a couple of little fights on certain things and still kind of stay in the relationship. That's why those four stages are called relational maintenance. In the stage of initiating specifically, that's the stage you're in when you're meeting a new person for the first time and introducing yourself and making making conversation. You know, the way you would if you just met somebody at a party. You just exchange names and just that kind of thing, and you just follow the cultural expectations what people do when they meet each other. And in general, you're trying to reduce uncertainty and sort of feel people out at this point. At this particular point, experimenting, you're trying to discover things that you don't know about people. Um, at this point, you'd be interested in them a little bit to some extent. Okay, so you try to discover what you don't know about them. You exchange various pieces of information, maybe like contact information or something. You try to find common interests, and you start making more small talk. Actually, then like beyond just introductions and banalities about the weather, more than likely. Now, in the stage of intensifying, this is when you start to consider someone a really good, close friend. You might tell someone a secret that you wouldn't want them to tell anybody else. And you would probably just be somewhat informal, like maybe you would drop the Mr. or the Miss or something like that, and you'd just kind of be all, you'd call them by their first name. Uh, and you would also kind of develop your own kind of in jokes and your own kind of language that references to things that only the two of you would know about. You just kind of start to feel a connection with the person, right? In the stage of integrating, this is the point where you would be in what most people would call a relationship. You sort of start to feel like you're just one person, like you depend on each other, and you are like a unit almost. It's almost like if you were married or you were just going steady for a long time or something like this, right? And at this point, you start to emphasize the fact that you have very similar attitudes, that you have a lot in common. I mean, you sort of almost present a united front, right, on issues. And you would even start sharing property like it. You would sort of start to see things as ours instead of just mine or yours. You kind of have that mentality. Uh, Now, in the stage of bonding, this would almost definitely be something like a marriage or a business partnership of some kind. I mean, this is like the highest stage you can reach. You would be conducting a public ritual. You would be in something that would be like everyone would know that you guys are committed to each other. There would be some kind of formal contract, so there's like no room to get out. It's like at this point, these are the ties that bind, right? You're like there's no more backing out, right? You're just it's going to happen. The merger's going to happen. The marriage is going to happen. The whatever it is going to happen, right? And you try to institutionalize it, and you of course commit to each other, and that's basically the end of the coming together stages. And this is the part you probably haven't been waiting for, the coming apart stages. Differentiating is the point at which you're pulling apart. Everything is you're like focused on each other's differences, the way that you guys are individuals, the way that you're different from each other. Uh, yeah, the more you focus on this, the less connected you feel. And of course, once you're aware of each other's interests as individuals, once you're thinking of yourselves as just independent individuals rather than a unit, you start to have conflict, right? Because what makes people feel connected to each other is that sense of being one. And then when you like think of yourselves as like separate, you don't get along so well because you're like aware of everything that's different or unpleasant about the other person. Okay, and then from there we go into circumscribing. Now, once you've started to see each other this way as most more or less individuals that don't have the same interests, you sort of start to distrust the other person a little bit. You don't share as much information with them. You try to limit them to safe topics, and there's generally a lot of you feel uncomfortable around them, and you just kind of want to fight with them because you're frustrated that you don't feel that sense of connection anymore, and yet like you want to have it back, but it's like not there because you don't have the same interests anymore. And at this point, since you're hoping that it'll kind of blow over, you're just trying to keep appearances. You maybe don't let the people around you know that there is anything wrong. You kind of don't want to like because you like have already bonded, right? You've gone through all the formal stuff, right, in the other stage, and you'd rather just kind of not be seen as wimping out. Now you just kind of want to stay in the relationship because it's kind of a thing in your life now, right? Mhm. In the stage of stagnating, assuming that you're still somehow together at this point, you kind of have you kind of have a lot of assumptions, and so it's like you start making assumptions about each other. Like you know that the person thinks stuff that you don't want to hear, so you just don't talk to them because you think you know what they think, and you don't really want to have to actually talk to them and have those assumptions confirmed because it's generally you won't like what they have to say, and then so when you do of course talk, a lot of times you have conflict, sometimes based on the assumptions and sometimes not, but in general. So actually having the actually talking at this point would make things worse because you don't have anything in common anymore. You're just it's just like it's basically the relationship is like an albatross that just kind of is hanging around your neck. You're stuck with you feel like you're stuck with this person. By then I think of course people will have started to notice there's a problem. And yeah, in general it's just a very, very awkward place to be. Mm. This stage avoiding is actually not as bad as the previous one because at this point you've both kind of started to get the idea that being together isn't really working, and at this point you'd probably have some kind of formal separation or estrangement more than likely if it was a marriage. And people would kind of like I mean, or if they're in a relationship, they would like take a break from each other. Okay, so at this point they're just avoiding being together, and And like whenever they might be in situations where they would normally be together, they make excuses to not be around each other. And if they are somehow around each other, they just ignore each other because this like that at this point they know that the way to avoid having the pain of talking to each other is just ignore each other. And eventually they're sort of trying to get their bond that was there that they know is no longer serving them to the point where they both just feel a sense of apathy to prepare them for what is more than likely the next and final stage. Okay, this is the final stage, and a lot of times relationships don't deteriorate through all of these stages, but this is the one that always happens if people come apart. Basically, this is what happens if you just avoid someone long enough, and uh, you okay. The relationship finally, and eventually just dies, terminates, goes away. Like you and them are like broken up. It's over, right? Like you're not friends, you're not anything. You're just nothing to each other, and you finally realize that you just can't have any kind of connection with each other, and that the best and that you'll both be happier around other people. You try to set you like close up all the loose ends between you. Like if you have like you this would be a divorce or something more than likely. Right? Like in a marriage, this would be like a divorce. You would like settle. Okay, well, what are the loose ends? Like okay, who's gonna get the kids? Who's gonna have this and that and the other thing. Like you try to separate out your property. You basically at this point you would almost definitely sever any kind of form bonds you have and just prepare for your separate lives. I mean, that's what the apathy in the previous stage was preparing you for, hopefully. And if not, then it could come as quite a blow. Now, Knapp's model is not perfect, and I'd like to discuss some of the limitations of it, of course. Linear stage models, such as Knapp's model and the social penetration theory it's based on, are limited in their ability to gauge the exact turning point of relationship, ignore fundamental differences between friendship and romantic relationships, and they neglect how deterioration and subsequent recovery can affect the nature of that relationship going forward. And one or more of Knapp stages may be skipped in any given relationship. In particular, coming apart stages are often skipped. They go straight to termination, and there's evidence that relationships can deteriorate much faster than they escalate. The data shown suggests that Knapp's model is better at predicting whether a relationship is coming together, coming apart, or stabilizing in general than it is at determining the exact stage of a relationship. Now, I would like to discuss the history of Knapp's model and its origins in the social penetration theory. Knapp's model is based on the same principles as social penetration theory, so there's a lot of overlap. Orientation is very similar to the stage of initiating and early stages of experimenting. Exploratory affective stage is very similar to later stages of experimenting and early stages of intensifying. The affective stage is very similar to later stages of intensifying and earlier stages of integrating. Unlike Knapp's model, arguments and criticism at this point are considered normal and healthy rather than a sign of circumscribing or differentiation. That's a key difference between the two theories. Uh, the stable stage is very similar to any stable point at a relationship between coming together and coming apart, but is exceptionally similar to later stages of integration and early stages of bonding. Unlike Knapp's model, it doesn't account for the impact of a contract or marriage on the nature of a relationship. You see, they say marriage changes things, and this model doesn't seem to agree. Like, I mean, Knapp's model would agree, this one doesn't so much. Overall, Knapp's model tends to be superior at predicting the ways in which relationship can change or move compared to social penetration theory because the opposing stages on each end and stability point in between incorporate some aspects of relational dialectics, which is another theory that is outside the scope of this project. Now for my conclusion. Overall, Knapp's model seems to be an excellent tool for relationship analysis and modeling. It has rightfully earned its place in the toolbox of researchers next to social penetration theory and relational dialectics, although there are underlying realities that does not yet explain as fully as the other two theories. For most modeling purposes, Knapp's model is generally superior to both other models in terms of predicting change in a relationship, although it is somewhat inferior to relational dialectics in terms of pure accuracy. I mean, this isn't really surprising because, I mean, if you think about it, the Knapp's model is kind of like a hybrid of the other two. So now I'm going to close with a quote. To quote Mark Knapp in Social Intercourse, From Greeting to Goodbye, which was the original book this theory was based on, people meet and separate, but funny things happen in between. It's almost like mysterious forces are pushing and pulling us, sometimes muddling our minds, sometimes captivating our souls. Abstract? Definitely. Poetry? Perhaps. The introduction to a scholarly textbook bent on demystifying human communication and developing relationships? Unlikely.